The news came to the family in a very unexpected way. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail addressed to the father. It was not something common because usually bills or advertisements came in the mailbox, but this envelope was official and heavy, with the stamp of a lawyer's office on it. When he opened it, his eyes widened in surprise. His late uncle, who had lived most of his life quietly in the countryside, had left him something in his will. It was not money, not jewelry, but an old mansion that stood in the far outskirts of town. The father was shocked and almost speechless. He had not been close to this uncle, and the memory of him was faint, but still he felt a small spark of curiosity. When he told his wife and children about the inheritance, their first reaction was laughter. They imagined something grand like in movies with golden gates and shining halls. But when they searched for pictures of the mansion online, their laughter grew louder. The building looked like it was ready to fall apart. The roof was broken in places, the walls were covered with black stains, and weeds had grown taller than the windows. The photos looked more like the set of an abandoned film than a home. The eldest child rolled his eyes and said it looked like a haunted house. The younger one giggled and asked if bats and rats lived there now. Even the wife shook her head and sighed. She told her husband that this was not an inheritance but a burden. She reminded him that repairs would cost too much, and nobody would ever buy such a wreck. The whole family spoke about the mansion as if it were a joke, not a gift. The father listened to them quietly. He smiled faintly at their jokes, but deep down he felt a little hurt. Still, he did not argue with them. He had always been the kind of man who kept his feelings inside, the type who did not raise his voice. While the rest of the family treated the mansion like a punchline, he kept looking at the letter again and again. Something inside him whispered that there was more to it than what met the eye. That night he could not sleep well. He kept thinking about his uncle. He remembered visiting him once or twice as a child, walking through tall halls, smelling the scent of old books and wood polish. He remembered his uncle's voice, calm but deep, telling him that every house has its own memory. The words floated back into his mind as if they had been waiting for years to be remembered. The next morning, he announced that he wanted to go see the mansion himself. His wife laughed and asked, "Why waste the time? You'll only come back with dust on your shoes." His children teased him, saying he should carry a broom to chase away the ghosts. But the father simply packed a small bag, took the car keys, and left. The drive to the countryside was long, almost 3 hours away from the city. With each mile, the air felt fresher, and the noise of traffic faded into quiet fields. Birds flew freely, and the landscape opened wide. The father felt calm but also nervous. He did not know what he would find there, but he was determined to see it with his own eyes. When he finally arrived, the sight made him stop in his tracks. The mansion stood tall but tired, like an old giant struggling to stand. The windows were dusty, the doors scratched, and ivy had climbed up the walls like green veins. The garden was no longer a garden, but a wild forest of weeds. Yet even in that ruined state, there was something grand about it. The father stood still for a moment, looking at the mansion not with disgust but with wonder. He imagined the life it once had, the dinners in the large dining hall, the laughter of guests, the footsteps echoing on wooden stairs. He slowly pushed the front gate, and it creaked loudly as if it had not been opened for years. Inside, dust floated in the air like tiny stars. The smell was heavy, a mix of wood, soil, and thyme. The floorboards groaned under his shoes. Sunlight slipped through the broken roof in thin golden lines, touching parts of the floor like secret spotlights. The father walked carefully through each room. He found old furniture covered in white cloth, chandeliers with broken crystals, and bookshelves filled with forgotten novels. The walls carried marks of years gone by, paint peeling like dry leaves, wallpaper faded into pale memories. Yet he did not see only decay, he saw history. As he explored, he felt a quiet sense of connection. It was as if the mansion wanted to tell him something, as if the old house had been waiting for him to return. He could almost hear his uncle's voice in the halls, gentle and calm. For the first time in many years, the father felt important. This house was not just bricks and wood. It was a story. He stayed for hours, walking from room to room, running his hand over the walls and opening old cabinets. He found some broken picture frames, a few postcards, and handwritten notes in the corners of drawers. Though they were simple things, they carried weight. He knew his family would laugh even more if he brought them home, so he kept them in his bag quietly. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, the father stood in front of the mansion once again. He looked at it from the outside, and though it looked broken and ruined, in his eyes it was still beautiful. He thought of how quickly his family had dismissed it, how fast they had called it useless. He knew they did not understand yet, but he felt something deep inside telling him not to give up on this place. When he returned home later that night, his children asked if he had seen any ghosts. His wife raised her eyebrows and asked if the house had collapsed on him. The father did not get angry. He simply smiled and said, "It is old, but it is still standing, and sometimes what looks ruined is not truly lost." They laughed at his words, but he kept quiet, holding on to his secret feeling that this mansion had a purpose, one that nobody else could see yet. That night, as he lay in bed, his mind replayed the creaking floors, the golden rays of light through broken glass, and the strange sense of belonging he had felt. The others might laugh, but in his heart, he knew the story of the mansion had only just begun. The father could not forget the mansion after his first visit. Even though his family laughed at him and called it a broken shell, something about that place called to him. He decided to go back again, this time with cleaning supplies and a notebook. He wanted to look more carefully at every corner, not just walk around as a visitor. This time he wanted to understand the house better. On a bright morning, he drove again through the countryside roads past fields and trees until the tall, tired figure of the mansion appeared in the distance. It looked the same as before, but to him it now felt less like a ruin, and more like a friend waiting for company. When he unlocked the gate and stepped inside, the silence of the place welcomed him. Dust still floated in the sunlight, but he was ready for it. He rolled up his sleeves and started by sweeping the large hall. Every step stirred clouds of dust, but slowly the ground beneath began to show its wooden pattern. He opened windows one by one, letting fresh air flow through the rooms. The wind carried away the smell of closed spaces and brought in the scent of wildflowers from the garden. The father felt proud of these small changes. They might have been invisible to others, but he knew the house was breathing again. As he moved from room to room, he discovered objects left behind by time. In the study, he found a desk with drawers stuck tight from years of neglect. With effort, he pulled them open and found old letters tied with faded string. The ink had blurred, but he could still read names, dates, and words of affection between family members long gone. He imagined his uncle sitting at that very desk, reading these letters, maybe smiling or shedding tears over them. The thought made him feel closer to the uncle he had barely known. In the dining room, he removed a dusty cloth from a long table. The wood underneath, though cracked, still shined faintly. He pictured guests sitting here long ago, sharing meals, laughing, raising glasses. The walls seemed to whisper echoes of voices that once filled the space. Though empty now, the room carried memories like hidden music. In one of the bedrooms upstairs, the father found a wardrobe with doors that resisted at first, but finally opened. Inside were old coats, dresses, and hats, still hanging neatly as if waiting for their owners to return. Time had left them fragile, yet they carried a sense of dignity. He touched the sleeve of a coat and thought about the people who had lived here before him, how they had walked these halls, how their lives had faded but left traces behind. Every discovery filled him with both sadness and wonder. He wished his family could see the house the way he saw it. But when he tried telling them that evening, they only smiled politely. His wife asked why he wasted energy on broken furniture, and his children shrugged and went back to their screens. The father did not argue. He simply kept his feelings to himself, knowing that some truths could not be explained with words. Days turned into weeks, and he kept returning to the mansion whenever he could. Each visit revealed something new. In the library, he found shelves of books, their pages yellow but still strong. Many were history volumes, some were novels, and a few had handwritten notes in the margins. He spent hours turning pages, imagining how his uncle must have loved reading here, surrounded by knowledge. Sometimes he paused to rest in the large garden. Though wild and overgrown, it had a strange beauty. Tall grass danced in the wind. Flowers pushed through cracks in the soil, and birds nested in the branches. The father would sit on a broken stone bench, close his eyes, and listen. The chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the distant sound of water flowing in a hidden stream all made him feel peaceful. It was a kind of peace he rarely felt in the busy city. One afternoon, while cleaning a corner of the hallway, he noticed a frame leaning against the wall. He picked it up and brushed off the dust. It was a portrait of a man in formal clothes. The face was stern but kind, and the eyes seemed alive even through faded colors. He realized it must have been his uncle, painted many years ago. The father stood staring at it for a long time. He felt as if the man in the painting was watching him, telling him silently to take care of what was left behind. That night, as he drove home, his heart was full. But when he walked into his own house, he was met with the same laughter. His children asked if he had found treasure yet. His wife reminded him that fixing the mansion would be impossible without millions of dollars. They told him to stop wasting time. He smiled quietly, not answering their teasing. In his heart, he knew they could not understand yet. Despite their doubts, he grew more connected to the mansion. He began keeping a small journal where he wrote down everything he found. Letters, books, objects, even the smell of the air in each room. He wanted to keep the memories safe, not only for himself but maybe for the future. One evening, as the sun was sinking low, he sat in the library holding one of the old books. He thought about how people measure value. To his family, the mansion was worthless because its walls were cracked and its roof was weak. But to him, it was full of hidden treasures, not gold or diamonds, but stories, history, and lessons. He began to feel that perhaps his uncle had left the mansion to him for a reason. Perhaps his uncle had known that he would be the only one to listen to the voice of the house. The next morning, he woke up with new energy. He told himself that even if nobody else cared, he would keep exploring. He would take the time to notice what others ignored. He would give attention to details, to whispers in the walls, to clues hidden in the corners. And so, with steady steps, he returned again, determined to look deeper. He moved old furniture aside, he checked behind curtains, and he tapped on walls, listening for hollow sounds. He did not know what he was searching for, but he trusted his feeling. The mansion had a story, and he was willing to hear it piece by piece. The laughter of his family still rang in his ears, but it no longer hurt him. He had found something far more powerful: purpose. The broken mansion had given him a reason to look beyond appearances, to believe that even in ruins, beauty and meaning can live. And slowly, without realizing it, he was moving closer to the secret the mansion had guarded for so many years. The father had already made the mansion a part of his life. Each visit gave him new energy, even though his family still joked about it. To them, the mansion was a ruin. To him, it was alive with secrets. He had started noticing details that most people would ignore. The way a door stuck in a certain corner, the faint scratch marks on a wall, or the sound of hollow wood under the floorboards. These small things stayed in his mind long after he left. One afternoon, while walking through the main hallway, he stopped in front of a large painting that hung crooked on the wall. It showed a wide landscape, but something about it felt strange. When he tried to adjust the frame, the wall behind made a dull echo. Curious, he tapped again. The sound was not solid stone, it was hollow. His heart beat faster. He carefully moved the painting aside and ran his hand along the wall. A small piece of wood felt loose. With gentle pressure, he pulled it, and to his surprise, a narrow panel slid open just enough to reveal a hidden space inside the wall. Inside the space was a small wooden box covered in dust. He lifted it out carefully and placed it on the floor. The box had a simple lock, but the metal was old and weak. With a little effort, he managed to open it. Inside were several envelopes neatly tied together, along with 2 small keys and a folded piece of paper. The handwriting on the paper was old-fashioned, but he could still read it. It seemed like instructions or notes from someone long ago. At the bottom, his uncle's signature appeared faintly. The father's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper fully. It was a map, not of the city, but of the mansion and its grounds. A circle was drawn in the garden with markings that suggested something hidden there. The note spoke of family belongings kept safe during hard times. The father could hardly believe what he was holding. When he drove home that night, his mind raced with possibilities. He wanted to tell his family about the discovery, but he stopped himself. He remembered how they had laughed at every word he had spoken about the mansion before. If he told them about hidden boxes and secret maps, they would only laugh louder. So he kept the secret inside, storing the envelopes and map carefully in his drawer at home. The next weekend, he returned with a shovel, gloves, and a lantern. He walked straight to the garden, following the map. The grass had grown so tall it brushed against his knees, but he pushed through, counting steps just as the paper directed. He stopped near an old stone fountain that no longer flowed. According to the map, Something important was buried not far from this spot. He began to dig carefully, the shovel breaking through soil that had not been touched for years. At first he found only roots and rocks. Sweat gathered on his forehead and doubt crept into his mind. Maybe it was just his uncle's imagination, or maybe he had misunderstood the markings, but something told him not to stop. He kept digging, his movement steady, his breath deep. After some time, the shovel hit something hard. He froze. Slowly, he dug around it until a wooden edge appeared. It was another box, larger than the one inside the wall. His heart raced as he pulled it free from the ground. The wood was damp and worn, but it had survived. With effort, he pried it open. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were items that looked far from ordinary. There were old documents with official seals, faded photographs, and what appeared to be land certificates. Alongside them were small objects, silver coins, a pocket watch, and jewelry that gleamed even under layers of dirt. The father sat back, staring at the contents with wide eyes. This was no simple box of memories. These were valuable items, things that could change everything. He felt a rush of emotions, excitement, disbelief, gratitude, and a quiet sadness that his uncle had kept these treasures hidden for so long. That evening, when he arrived home later than usual, his family asked where he had been. His children teased him again, asking if he had found ghosts or maybe a mouse to bring home. His wife shook her head and said he was wasting his strength. The father simply smiled, not answering. Deep inside, he was holding a secret that was too large to explain in words. He spent the night studying the documents he had found. They mentioned land ownership, shares in old businesses, and bonds that could still hold value. He was no expert, but he knew these papers meant something important. He realized his uncle must have hidden them during difficult times, perhaps during financial troubles or family disputes. Whatever the reason, they had now been passed to him, silently waiting until someone cared enough to look. The father felt both proud and nervous. He knew he could not keep this hidden forever, but he also knew he had to be careful. He wanted to confirm the value of the items before speaking a word to his family. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of a discovery that could change their future. The next day, he returned to the mansion to search more thoroughly. He tapped on walls, opened cupboards, and looked under loose floorboards. In the library, he noticed a shelf that did not sit quite evenly. When he pushed against it, the entire shelf moved slightly, revealing a small compartment behind it. Inside was another envelope containing more keys and a letter written by his uncle. The letter was simple but powerful. His uncle wrote about how wealth and history should be protected from careless hands. He explained that not everyone could see value in broken things, and that only someone with patience and respect would uncover what was truly hidden. The father's eyes watered as he read those words. It felt as if his uncle had written the letter directly to him, knowing he would be the one to find it. From that day forward, the father looked at the mansion differently. It was no longer just an old building. It was a puzzle, a treasure chest, and a message from the past. Every crack in the wall, every faded painting, every piece of dust-covered furniture could be holding another clue. He realized the house was testing him, rewarding him each time he showed care and patience. At home, his family still laughed, still teased, still called the mansion useless. But their voices no longer bothered him. He carried the letter in his pocket, and whenever doubt tried to creep into his mind, he read his uncle's words again. They gave him courage and reminded him that he was on the right path. The father did not yet know how valuable his discoveries were. He did not know that experts would one day place the worth at hundreds of millions. All he knew was that he had found something extraordinary, and that he was the only one who believed in it. The mansion, which had once been mocked as ruined and useless, was slowly revealing its secrets. And with each secret uncovered, the father's quiet determination grew stronger. The days that followed were unlike any the father had ever lived. His secret discoveries inside the mansion filled him with both excitement and fear. He now knew that the place was more than just a forgotten building. It was a chest of stories and wealth, left behind by a man who clearly wanted him to uncover it step by step. Every visit brought him closer to something greater. And though he did not yet know the full measure of what was hidden, he trusted his instincts. On a crisp morning, he returned to the mansion with renewed determination. He carried with him a lantern, his journal, and the map his uncle had left behind. He wanted to explore deeper, not just in the open rooms, but in places where most people would never think to look. He walked through the halls with quiet steps, listening for sounds, watching for unusual marks. The mansion was old and tired, yet he felt it alive in its silence, waiting for him. In the library, he placed the lantern on the table and studied the map again. His eyes fell on a faint mark he had not noticed before, drawn near the garden and connected by a dotted line to one of the side walls of the house. He decided to follow it. Outside, the air was cool and the wind moved the tall grass around him. He circled the building until he reached the spot. At first glance, it was nothing but a wall covered in ivy, but when he moved the plants aside, he saw something surprising. A small arched wooden door stood hidden, almost blended into the wall. The handle was rusted, but the lock looked old and familiar. He reached into his pocket and pulled out one of the keys he had found earlier. With trembling hands, he placed it into the lock, and to his amazement, it turned smoothly. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow staircase leading downwards. A rush of cool, damp air escaped, carrying with it the smell of earth and stone. The father took a deep breath, lifted the lantern, and carefully stepped inside. The staircase led to an underground chamber. The walls were stone and the ceiling was low, but the space was wide enough to hold shelves and chests. Dust coated everything, yet the objects inside seemed untouched by time. The father's heart raced as he walked forward, lantern light flickering across the surfaces. He reached the first shelf and saw boxes filled with rolled documents tied neatly with ribbons. On another shelf were leather-bound journals and ledgers filled with numbers and signatures. Then his eyes fell on the largest chest in the room. It was wooden with iron edges, its lid heavy and locked. He took out the second key from his pocket, hoping it would fit. When the key slid in and turned, his hands shook. Slowly, he lifted the lid, and what he saw made him step back in shock. Inside the chest were items of great value. Antique jewelry rested in velvet boxes, their stones sparkling faintly even in the dim light. Gold coins lay in small sacks, their surfaces shining through the dust. Silver cutlery, decorative ornaments, and rare paintings wrapped in cloth filled the space. It was as though the chest had been sleeping for decades, waiting for someone to open it. The father's breath came fast. He knelt beside the chest and touched the objects carefully, afraid they might vanish if he blinked. He could not believe his eyes. This was wealth beyond his imagination, not just in money but in history. Each item told a story, each piece carried a memory of another time. He realized his uncle had not only saved financial documents but had also preserved treasures of art and family legacy. He sat there in silence for a long time, his lantern casting golden light across the chamber. For years, people had laughed at the idea of the mansion being valuable. Yet here, in the hidden depths of the house, lay proof that it was worth more than anyone could guess. He felt gratitude fill his heart. His uncle had trusted him not through words, but through the way the house was left to him. When he finally returned home that night, his clothes dusty and his face glowing with secret joy, his family barely looked up. His children asked him if he had finally found a ghost, and his wife told him he smelled of dirt and should take a shower. The father smiled quietly and said nothing. He carried within him a truth too powerful to explain in casual words. The next day, he decided to have some of the items evaluated. He carefully packed a few coins, one piece of jewelry, and some documents, and took them to an expert in the city. The expert examined them with great attention, weighing, testing, and reading the old papers. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with disbelief. He explained that the items were extremely rare, some dating back over 100 years, and their combined value already reached millions. He said that if the rest of the collection matched these pieces, the total worth could easily cross hundreds of millions. The father listened in silence, his hands folded on the table. He felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. What he had suspected in his heart was now confirmed with certainty. The ruined mansion that everyone had mocked was not a burden, it was a fortune. As he left the expert's office, the world around him looked different. The busy streets, the tall buildings, the noise of the city, all of it faded in importance. What truly mattered was the mansion and the secret it held. He thought of how quickly people had judged it by its broken walls and falling roof, never imagining that inside its silence rested treasures of such scale. Back at home, the family noticed a change in him. His quiet smile was now steady, his steps were firm, and his eyes held a glow they had never seen before. Yet when they asked him about it, he gave no clear answers. He wanted to reveal the truth, but not yet. He knew they had to see it with their own eyes to believe it. In the following days, he arranged for professionals to visit the mansion discreetly. He wanted them to verify the discoveries, to document everything properly, and to ensure the value was real. Each expert who walked into the underground chamber came out wide-eyed and speechless. Their reports confirmed what the father already knew. The items together were worth an astonishing amount, close to $200 million. The father stood quietly as the numbers were spoken aloud. He felt no need to shout or boast. Instead, he thought of the journey that had brought him here, the laughter of his family, the loneliness of searching alone, the patience required to notice the smallest clues. All of it had led to this moment. The ruined mansion was no longer a symbol of embarrassment. It was now a symbol of fortune, history, and quiet strength. The father knew that soon his family would learn the truth. Soon, their laughter would turn to silence and their disbelief would turn to awe. For now he kept the secret close to his heart, standing in the garden of the mansion with the wind brushing past him. He looked up at the broken roof, the cracked windows, the walls covered in ivy, and he smiled. What others saw as ruin, he now saw as triumph. The mansion had revealed its treasure, and in doing so, it had revealed something even greater: the value of patience, faith, and quiet belief. When the father returned home after the mansion's treasure had been confirmed, he felt a quiet pride that he could not yet share. The house that everyone had mocked was no longer just an old building. It was a symbol of perseverance, patience, and faith. His family still teased him as he entered, unaware of the life-changing discovery he carried in his heart. The children joked about his haunted mansion, and his wife lightly scolded him for spending so much time there. He smiled gently at their words, not yet revealing the truth, because he wanted them to understand fully, to see it for themselves. Over the next few days, the father began preparing the mansion for the family to see its hidden wonders. He cleaned the rooms carefully, repairing small things with care, and organized the treasures he had uncovered. He placed the coins, jewelry, and antique documents in neat arrangements. The once dark hallways were now brighter as he opened windows, polished floors, and dusted furniture. The mansion, though still old, began to regain its dignity and charm. Finally, he invited his family to visit. At first, they were skeptical, thinking he had only spent time cleaning or pretending to find more secrets. But as they stepped through the front gate, their skepticism slowly turned into surprise. The mansion did not look as empty and broken as before. The rooms, though aged, were tidy and filled with objects that carried history and elegance. Their laughter faltered as they noticed the details. The paintings carefully restored, the floors polished, and the objects displayed with care. The father led them to the underground chamber, where the real treasures lay. As the family saw the gold coins, antique jewelry, rare documents, and paintings, their eyes widened. The children whispered to each other, barely able to believe what they were seeing. His wife stood still, a mixture of shock and admiration on her face. The father did not speak immediately. He let them take in the sight, letting the silence emphasize the importance of what had been discovered. After a few minutes, he explained how he had found the hidden boxes, followed the map left by his uncle, and carefully explored each part of the mansion. He spoke about the patience it had required, the hours spent examining the rooms, and the way he had learned to see value in things that others considered worthless. His voice was calm, steady, and full of quiet strength. His family listened, their earlier teasing forgotten, replaced by wonder and respect. The children could hardly contain their excitement. They touched the coins, carefully opened the boxes, and looked at the old documents. Their eyes sparkled with curiosity, as though they were seeing history come alive before them. They asked countless questions, not only about the treasures themselves, but about the process their father had followed, the hidden clues, and the patience he had shown. For the first time, they saw him not just as a father, but as someone with wisdom and determination. His wife, who had once doubted him, now looked at him with deep admiration. She realized how wrong she had been to call the mansion useless and to laugh at his efforts. She saw the courage it had taken to keep believing when everyone else had mocked him. A new respect grew between them as she understood the depth of his character, the quiet persistence, the careful observation, and the faith that had led to this remarkable discovery. As the family walked through the mansion together, they began to notice more than just the treasures. They saw the beauty hidden in the architecture, the history etched in the walls and the care their father had taken to restore each room. The laughter of mockery turned into laughter of joy as they explored hallways and corners that had once been ignored. The mansion, once a symbol of ruin, had become a place of wonder, learning, and family pride. The father also shared the story of his uncle, the man who had lived quietly, who had left behind both challenges and treasures, trusting that the right person would uncover them. The family realized that the mansion's real value was not only in the objects but in the lessons it carried: patience, respect for history, careful observation, and quiet determination. They began to see the house as a teacher rather than a burden, and themselves as students who had learned the most from the father's example. In the following weeks, the family worked together to restore more of the mansion. They repaired the garden, trimmed the overgrown grass, and planted flowers where weeds had once ruled. The children painted walls under their father's guidance, learning the value of careful work and attention to detail. Even the wife spent time arranging old furniture and decorating rooms, her hands busy but her heart full of pride. The mansion became a project that united the family, turning laughter from ridicule into laughter of shared accomplishment. The father also invited experts to properly document and preserve the treasures. Each document, painting, and object was carefully recorded, cataloged, and protected. He learned that some of the antique pieces were extremely rare, with historical value that could never be replaced. The family marveled at the significance, realizing that the mansion was not only a financial treasure, but a cultural one as well. They felt honored to be the guardians of something so precious. News of the mansion's discoveries eventually spread in a quiet, controlled way. Experts, historians, and a few neighbors came to see the restoration and the treasures. Everyone who visited was amazed, unable to imagine how such wealth and history had been hidden in a place once called ruined. The father's family felt pride as they saw the astonished expressions of visitors. They realized that the mockery they had once felt was replaced now by admiration and respect, both from outsiders and within their own hearts. Over time, the mansion became more than just a home or a treasure. It became a symbol of faith, patience, and determination. The father had turned ridicule into triumph, teaching his family a lesson that would remain with them forever. They learned that appearances can be deceiving, that value is often hidden, and that quiet belief and careful attention can uncover miracles where others see only ruin. The father also understood that the true reward was not only the fortune or the treasures themselves. The real treasure was the journey, his patience, his careful observations, his respect for the past, and the way he had inspired his family to see differently. The mansion had taught them all that sometimes. Those who are mocked or underestimated hold the greatest strength and wisdom. In the evenings, the family would sit together in the large dining room, once empty and cold, now bright and full of warmth. They shared meals, laughter, and stories, appreciating not just the material treasures but the shared memories they were creating. The mansion, once a symbol of ruin and embarrassment, had become a home filled with joy, learning, and love. The father would sometimes walk alone through the halls, looking at the treasures, the restored rooms, and the garden, and he would smile quietly. He thought about his uncle, imagining him watching from above, proud that someone had cared enough to uncover and protect what he had left behind. And in those moments he realized that the greatest discovery was not only the riches of the mansion, but the respect, admiration, and love of his family, who had learned to see with new eyes. By the time the mansion was fully restored and the treasures properly documented, the father's family no longer laughed at him. They spoke of him with admiration and shared the story of the mansion with friends and neighbors. The tale of the once ruined house, the hidden treasures, and the father who never gave up became an inspiration for everyone who heard it. The father understood that life often hides its greatest rewards behind challenges and appearances. What seemed worthless at first glance often carries more value than anyone can imagine, and the mansion, once a place of dust, decay, and mockery, had become a testament to the power of faith, patience, and quiet courage. In the end, the family learned a lesson that money or treasures alone could never teach. They discovered the importance of believing in what others overlook, of respecting the past, and of trusting the wisdom of someone who never gives up. The father, once laughed at and dismissed, had turned the impossible into reality, and in doing so, had transformed not only the mansion but the hearts of everyone around him. The mansion, The treasures and the family's newfound respect became symbols of hope and perseverance. And as the father stood one evening in the garden, looking at the sun setting behind the restored walls, he smiled, knowing that every laugh that had once hurt him had led to this moment of triumph, pride, and love.